The one and only Ann Coulter, who has a new book out, and it's a classic, as all of hers are. This was entitled Resistance is Futile. How are you doing, Ann? Great to have you back here with us.
So happy to be here, and thank you for the excellent title, but mine is a different kind of resistance.
Well, now, I was going to ask you about it. You know, Ann, I have to be honest. Sometimes, you run hot and cold on the people that you fervently endorse. Romney was a disappointment, for example. And I don't know, I haven't yet been able to determine where you're coming down with President Trump as we sit here today, but we'll find out.
Yes.
In due course. But resistance is futile. Now, you can take that any number of ways. Are you talking about the left-wing resistance? Resistance to Trump is futile? Or what resistance here?
Not the resistance to you, Rush, who are irresistible.
That's right. There isn't any.
There isn't any, exactly. No, this is the resistance that, shockingly, Hillary Clinton claimed to join a few months after the election. You know, in America, we refer to political opponents who lose as the loyal opposition. If Trump had lost the election and a few months afterwards announced that he was part of the resistance, people would say that's a military term. That's the French Revolution, the resistance to the Nazis. He's dog whistling to the militias. It's a message to the KKK, and imagine that then being accompanied by right-wing violence against Hillary supporters, as we have seen, enormous violence by Antifa and left-wing lunatics against Trump supporters. I think people would recognize we're in the middle of a fascist uprising, and that it was absolutely irresponsible for a losing presidential candidate to announce that to be part of the resistance. It's actually pretty shocking that she did that.
Well, I remember, during the, I guess it was the last debate, and Chris Wallace, I think, asked Trump, because it had been, they've been buzzing about this. Mr. Trump, can you tell us, if you lose the election, will you concede? And Trump said, no, I'm not going to tell you that tonight. I'm not going to let you run a headline that I'm announcing I'm losing the election tonight. Right. I remember the reaction. They had a conniption, and Trump is a threat to democracy. Trump's going to throw 200 plus years overboard. Now look.
Yes, and at the time I was a little testy with Chris Wallace for not asking the same question of Hillary. Boy, was I right. I guess he should have, since they aren't accepting the results of the election.
Okay, first chapter, the resistance. Trump is Hitler times infinity. So you're characterizing the left-wing resistance here and how they're reaching just the extreme degrees that you make it. How do they have any credibility, even with some of their wacky supporters? None of it makes sense. None of what they're doing or saying makes any sense to anybody.
No, I know. The leftists have a mollusk's grasp of history, so they know Hitler bad, fascism bad. So what do we call Trump if we want to call him the worst thing we can think of? He's Hitler. He's like Hitler. And it's not just, the crazy social justice warriors and the Antifa and university professors out yelling this stuff. This has appeared in the pages of the New York Times, in columns by David Brooks, and a book by Madeline Albright warning Republicans that this cult of personality. So then he gets an authoritarian personality. Then he gets into office, and it turns out he has the exact opposite of an authoritarian personality. He has a suck-up personality. I don't remember Joseph Stalin going around saying, oh, these people are incredible. They're fantastic people. Kim Jong-un, he just loves his people. I love these kids. He is, as many have said, Trump is like a couch cushion. He bears the impression of the last person who talks to him. He's doing many great things, but to describe him as having an authoritarian personality, or take the example of his not following an unconstitutional executive order of Obama's on DACA and his, as I refer to it, the Muslim ban. The three branches of government are, to use one of my favorite words, co-equal, because it means the same as equal. So the president has all of the powers of the executive branch in his hands. Some potty little district court judge in Hawaii is going to tell him no. I would love for some president someday to say, Thanks for your opinion, Judge, but I took an oath to uphold the Constitution, too. I have the authority as president given to me by the Constitution and by the law to exclude any immigrants in the interests of national security, which he has full authority to do, but he doesn't. No, Trump says, fine, we will appeal this. We will wait. We'll work its way through the court. So, it really is just them knowing that Hitler is supposed to be bad. They may as well call Trump a poopy head.
Well, I remember when this program started some 30 years ago, it was so uncool to refer to any political opponent as Hitler back then. It was lazy. So it was said to be intellectually lazy.
Yeah.
It's damaging. Nobody could be anywhere close to Hitler, much less worse. And now look, it's part of their retinue. It's part of their daily lexicon. Look at the. Look. You've been chronicling this for the left and their craziness for the longest time, and now the resistance. But is any of it working? Does any of it concern you?
Not really. I mean, the violence concerns me as anyone any Trump supporter has to worry about getting beaten up by going to a Trump rally or being thrown out of a restaurant. I mean, yeah, that's I admit a little irksome. But I think the resistance would be much better off if they'd read my book. I give them some tips on how they ought to be attacking Trump, which is to attack him on the worst thing he's actually done. And stop running off on wild, demented conspiracy theories that no one believes and screaming that he's Hitler.
Well, give me an example of something he's done that you think they could legitimately score some points with. I mean, they've tried accusing him of separating families at the border.
Right.
And I've even had people on our side say, Rush, that's really bad. Those pictures are bad. Trump's got to do this. And he didn't do it.
Right.
He didn't do it. People respond to the media. It's amazing, even on our side, how sometimes it is easy for the media to start creating doubt. What? You're not going to be giving anything away.
If I were advising the Democrats, and don't worry, they're not going to listen to the excellent advice I am imparting to them. Look, Sherrod Brown is an old-style Democrat, senator from Ohio. He used to 100% agree with Trump on the trade deals. Jesse Jackson, Barbara Jordan, Harry Reid, Barbara Boxer, and Di-Fi used to all agree with Trump on the immigration issue. This is a new thing. The entire Democratic Party's philosophy and the left-wing philosophy is, where's Trump on that? Oh, that's awful. I think we could get the left to start defending pederasty if we told them that Trump was against it. But if they went back to their old-style Democratic politics, what you would attack Trump for is not really hopping to on all of those promises, like the wall. But they can't do it. They can't. Look at Molly Tibbetts last week. That if the Democratic Party were sane, that should be Trump's Kate Steinle. He's president. He's got a Republican House. He's got a Republican Senate. But don't worry, Democrats have blown it. They won't take advantage of it.
You think that? Do you believe, since you bring this up, do you think there's going to be a blue wave? You think the Democrats are going to take the House?
Well, there will be, historically, the odds are overwhelming that there should be a blue wave. I think the resistance keeps bringing Trump's voters back. And if he really pushes on the popular issues he won the election on, immigration, trade, no more pointless wars, and gives a lot of rallies. I've been recommending that his staff just block off September and October and do nothing but Trump rallies. I keep seeing on MSNBC, I'm a hate watcher because I'm unusual that way. They keep claiming, oh, yeah, I don't think a Trump rally is going to help in my district. Oh, it's just going to turn off the suburban soccer moms. No. Do not take advice from MSNBC. Trump coming to town totally energizes the base. They spread out. It goes out in concentric circles. It's like listening to you, Rush. It spreads beyond the actual person listening to you. They tell their coworkers and their neighbors. So I think he can limit it, and luckily we have a lot of seats to give up in the House, and it's very unlikely that the Democrats will take the Senate. We don't really have that many seats up.
Well, I think you're right about the rallies. Did I read the other day where they're blocking out as many as 4 days a week in September and October? Not every week, but some weeks. He's going to go out that many times.
He should definitely do that. That's brilliant. Because if we do lose the House, that is absolutely the end of hope.
How do you convey that message? You know, I was telling people today and yesterday, the GDP numbers out today, 4.2%. Blue-collar workers survey, they're overwhelmingly in love with Trump. They have a renewed faith and so forth. The tax cuts, this economy is genuinely booming in ways that it hasn't in enough time, that some people have never lived through an economy booming like this. They've only lived through an America in decline. They've been told to get used to an American decline, that jobs are not coming back. Somehow, Trump and his team have got to get the message out that if the Democrats win, this all ends.
Yeah.
Because the Democrats equal Venezuela. Maybe you don't want to say that. That's maybe too extreme. But the Democrats are going to bring all this to a screeching halt on purpose.
Oh, yes, that's absolutely right. One of the wonderful things about Trump, I mean, he does get the message out. And as I say in the last chapter, we may not get the wall out of him. But I do think the way he raises issues on Twitter, I completely disagree with the cliche you hear all the time on TV. Oh, he tweets too much. No, I love his tweeting. I want him to be the official communicator for the Republican Party.
Wait a minute. Now, my memory could be failing me, but I thought, speaking of the wall, I thought there was a period of time, and maybe 2 months ago, that you had really gotten down on Trump and were openly saying so. It seemed like you'd lost some faith, and it was about the wall, it was about immigration, but you don't sound like that today.
Well, I've been giving him tough love on the wall since the day after the election. No, I assume you and everyone remembers election night. I remember it very distinctly. And I thought, after Adios America and In Trump We Trust, it's finally happened. We have a shot to save America. My work is done. I'm just going to kick back. I'll hang out with Rush Limbaugh in Palm Beach. I'll have cocktails and enjoy myself. No, it turns out this presidency is more of a transactional presidency. He does have to be swatted on the nose with a rolled up newspaper when he goes astray. But remember, he used to do that all the time during the campaign. Remember during that debate when he was worse on H-1B visas than Marco Rubio, and all of Twitter explodes? He has to come out with a clarification and retraction a few hours after the debate. So we do have to keep our eyes on him, but it would have been the end of hope if Hillary had been elected.
Oh, my God. Look, there's nobody that outworks him. There's nobody who can keep up with him energy-wise, and he has stayed true to every promise that he's made, at least in terms of effort and in terms of accomplishing them more than any president in recent memory, and he's undeterred. I'd take a break, but I want you to speak to psychology. You know him pretty well. I don't know of any other elected official in this country, Republican especially, who could withstand an average week that Donald Trump gets and still remain focused and positive and upbeat. And basically, we know it bothers him. You know him, and we know it bothers him, but it doesn't deter him. And he's it. And I think this is what his voters get. Without him, what they want dies. And they're going to support, they're not going to let any Access Hollywood video take him out. They're not going to let any of these usual ways the media destroys Republicans. They're not going to let them succeed. They're going to defend him to no end. But anyway, let me take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue with Ann Coulter and her new book, Resistance is Futile. We are back with Ann Coulter, brand new, hot off the press. Resistance is Futile, New York Times and every other list bestseller. Look, we already discussed your opinion of Trump and your assessment where he is, and in the limited time we've got here, you claim, and everybody's trying to find out, what is the actual genesis, the beginning of this Russian collusion story? When did it actually, what triggered it? The House committees have been investigating it. They think the FBI is shielding documents on when this really began. You've searched the record, and what do you think about it? Where did it begin? When did it begin? Who's behind it?
Well, you already know that it was Hillary Clinton. You've cited Shattered, the book, where they talk about coming up with it after the election. What I think is fun about my book, there are a few three important historical notes. For one thing, Democrats, as you know, always claim we was robbed when they lose an election, unless it's a landslide like Reagan in 1984. But Reagan in 1980, there was a huge conspiracy about how Reagan had sent Bush and other emissaries to Iran and asked them to hold the hostages until after the election. That actually appeared on 2/3 of the New York Times op-ed page, that insane, bonkers conspiracy theory. They always say it took the deft touch of the Clintons to have one of these conspiracy theories go on and on and on and consume the entire country. The other interesting thing, because I don't have a job and can spend all day reading Nexus, is when it was first launched, the Russia conspiracy theory, it was by Robbie Mook, Hillary's campaign manager, on the eve of the Democratic National Convention. Why? Because the WikiLeaks documents had just gone up. And this is what Hillary always does. When she's caught in the middle of a scandal, she finds some apocryphal enemy to blame. She blamed some man in Arkansas for hating her husband after losing to him, Sheffield Nelson for Jennifer Flowers. There was the vast right-wing conspiracy for Monica. She blamed the sexism of the media for her loss to Obama in 2008. So there are always mysterious dark forces conspiring against her when she's caught in a scandal. Third, and I think an hilarious part of the book that can really only be shown in a book, it's sort of a visual thing, is that at the time, the entire mainstream media responded to Robbie Mook's interview with George Stephanopoulos on the eve of the Democratic National Convention, claiming that experts were telling him, that Russia had hacked the DNC and passed it to WikiLeaks in an effort to help Trump. Okay, the New York Times, the LA Times, even the New York Daily News laughed at this. They basically all saw it as the craziest John Bircher conspiracy that even the John Birchers wouldn't have come up with. And as the New York Times and the LA Times and the rest of them said, you're launching this theory on the basis of unnamed experts. Basically, the media did not take it seriously. Even when Hillary brought it up in the debates, the New York Times sort of protected her by mentioning it on page A14. It was not until disaster struck and Hillary lost the election that the media goes looking through the record and what explains this? What could it be? It can't be that Trump was running on popular ideas or there was anything wrong with our love Hillary Clinton. That's when they started pushing it as the exact same reporters, the exact same newspapers suddenly started pushing it as a serious theory.
All right, now, just a couple minutes here. I want to know what you think of the special counsel investigation, where it's going, how long it's going to go on, and what the ultimate resolution to it's going to be.
Well, it's utterly outrageous. We only have a special counsel because of the false insinuations of James Comey that President Trump was under investigation. Of course Trump was frustrated. He's trying to run the country here, and the head of the FBI, I have the quotes from the hearings, it's just outrageous the way Comey was implying Trump was under investigation. Bam, we get the special counsel. And 2 months later, Comey admits, yeah, he was never under investigation. Not only that, but when we found out the FBI was spying on the Trump campaign, remember, their response was, we weren't spying, we were trying to protect Trump.
Exactly. Okay, 1 minute. Where's it going? How's it end?
Perhaps. I think it's probably useful to. I mean, Trump has full authority to fire Mueller, to throw off the investigation. I think he can probably use it. It's so crazy that it's so far off. I think it's helping Trump.
Yeah, it's you don't sound worried about any of these things, these irons in the fire that the Democrats have to literally destroy him. I mean, they're not going to stop. They're going to give everything they've got. But it's encouraging because you go up and down optimism. It's encouraging to hear that you don't seem to be that worried about all this in the long term. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. Everything the left hates about Trump is what I love about him. I loved his response to Charlottesville. I love him this week attacking the social media, the big tech firms for censorship. I love him going after the media and calling them fake news. It's exactly what I think the base loves about him. We finally have a Republican who fights back.
Excellent. Perfect timing.
Okay, everybody, I want to get to my guest immediately. This is Dennis Prager. Thank you for being with me. My guest is Gregg Jarrett, Fox News political analyst. His brand new book is The Russia Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. Gregg Jarrett, welcome to the Dennis Prager Show.
Dennis, thanks for having me with you.
I got to tell you something. Number one, I read a tremendous amount, but I since I have to read so much for everyday show, in the political realm especially, I try to have my book reading. For example, the book before yours that I just read is this latest book on the Indianapolis. I just read a 1,000-page biography of Beethoven. I love that stuff. So I have to tell you the following. I consider your book to be one of the most significant political books of the last decade. I have no vested interest in saying this to you. I want my listeners to hear this. The only caveat I would add is that I found your book to be almost as depressing as the Indianapolis.
Well, I just finished a book on Ulysses Grant, Ron Chernow's great book, and it was an incredible book. I haven't read the Indianapolis yet, but I intend to. But this book, I'm a lawyer by trade. I used to practice law in California. So I tried to lay out not just the law, but the evidence and the facts. And I think once readers get to the very end, they will reach the inexorable conclusion that this was a hoax manufactured by high-ranking officials within the FBI and the Department of Justice, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. The FBI had no legal basis to launch its investigation. There was no probable cause, no credible evidence that crimes were committed, no plausible intelligence to justify a counterintelligence probe. Facts were invented or exaggerated. And they did this because these people, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, they all wanted Hillary Clinton to be president. So they cleared her, notwithstanding obvious and compelling evidence that she committed crimes. And on the same day that they cleared her, July 5th, 2016, Comey's FBI is meeting secretly with Christopher Steele, the author of the anti-Trump totally fabricated dossier. And armed with that document, even though they knew it was fake, they used it as a pretext to launch this dilating investigation of Trump to try to stop him from being president. When that failed, they doubled down and used it to try to undo the election results and destroy his presidency.
There is a piece in the Los Angeles Times, I devoted an entire hour to reading from it and discussing it, wherein the columnist in the Los Angeles Times this past weekend writes, look, we have to undo this last election. The election was a fraud. This is their belief. So it's righteous to undo the election.
Yeah, it's very strange, that kind of mentality. It's anathema to the democratic process. Did Russians attempt to meddle in the 2016 election? Of course they did. They always do. As I write in the book, they've done this for decades, dating back to the Soviet Union. Before the internet and computers, of course, they used different methods, but the goal was the same: to try to deconstruct the democracy they despise, America. But that's completely different than collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians to influence the election. There's not a scintilla of evidence that ever occurred. And in fact, as I explain in my book, The Russia Hoax, collusion is not even a crime.
Yes, you explain that very, very well, and it is one of the many revelatory things to even someone like myself who's been immersed in this. Likewise, you made me realize, and I felt stupid that I didn't realize it before you pointed it out. So I have to tell you, reading your book was not only depressing, it was humbling. And I realized your point is so well taken. The Comey press conference by which the Democrats say he, through the election to Trump, was actually totally in her, or nearly totally in her camp. It exonerated her from true crimes.
It did, and in fact, people say, well, Comey's decision to reopen the investigation helped Trump, as you point out. The fact is that James Comey didn't want to reopen the investigation. They sat on it for an entire month. They knew about the Anthony Weiner emails a month before, and they weren't going to do anything about it. And it was federal prosecutors in New York that eventually threatened to go public with it, forcing Comey to make a decision to reopen the investigation. So that's one of those canards that liberals and Democrats and the media continue to push.
Right, but I want to just make it clear to my listeners what you made clear to me, that if he had been intellectually and judicially honest, he would have advocated prosecution, although even that is not, doesn't get to the darkness of this whole matter, because it wasn't in his province to declare what's prosecutable. He just provides evidence to the DOJ, which refused to do it.
That's correct. Hillary Clinton clearly violated several different provisions of the Espionage Act. And in fact, Comey initially wrote that the sheer quantity of classified information, 110 documents, on her unauthorized unsecured server was evidence of gross negligence under the statute. That term has a distinct legal meaning. It's drawn directly from the felony statute. But Comey wanted to clear her anyway. So Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and the rest of his staff sat down on June 6, 2016, at Strzok's computer, and they sanitized Comey's findings of fact that Clinton had committed crimes. And, they substituted the term careless. Where did they get that? They got it from Barack Obama, who weeks earlier had gone on national television and called Clinton's conduct merely careless, that she didn't intend to break the law. So it was an investigation that was entirely a sham, a charade. And, that was the beginning of the Russia hoax.
Let me remind everybody I'm speaking to Keith Jarrett of Fox News, but the reason is not because he's with Fox News, but because he's the author of this bomb, really I'm sorry, Keith Jarrett. That's funny. I'm thinking of music.
The pianist.
Yes, I know. It's really, well, what am I going to do? Gregg Jarrett. I'm so sorry, Greg.
It's okay.
His new book is The Russia Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton and frame Donald Trump. The book is up at DennisPrager.com. You had mentioned the 110 classified documents. Let me understand. I've never understood this. How could there be only 110 classified documents during her 4-year tenure as Secretary of State? Well,
there were roughly 2,000, but 110 were classified, sent, or received that way. And so, as I point out in the book, there were thousands. But surely 110 were clearly marked, and they were marked classified, sent, or received that way, so there was no getting around it. So there should have been 110 felony counts against Hillary Clinton. Instead, there weren't any at all. And as I explain in the book in great detail, so many others have done the same thing, but on a much smaller scale, and yet they have been.
Yes, you give example after example. Guy went to prison. Guy with a wife and 1-year-old daughter.
Yeah,
was he the one who took some selfies in his submarine?
Yeah, there's two military guys. The case that matches the most closely to Hillary Clinton was Brian Nishimura, a naval reservist who downloaded some classified photos onto his personal devices.
Right.
Now, he was prosecuted and forced to plead guilty under gross negligence. How is that even, remotely different?
Right. All right. We'll be back in a moment with Gregg Jarrett. The book The Russia Hoax is up at DennisPrager.com. It gets worse, as you will find out when we come back. I'm Dennis Prager. And quickly here, my minute a day on behalf of TaxCutsWork.com, where I just ask you to visit, know how the tax cuts have done so well. They're not asking you for money. They're just asking you to be aware of what they're doing. This is a terrific group. I know the head of it personally, and I've had also some of their spokesmen on. The tax cuts, if you are following the economy, have been unbelievable. The benefits that we have reaped in this country. They'd like to know your story, by the way. That's one of the things that they'd like you to do, is to email a letter, both to Congress telling them to make the tax cuts permanent, and for you to tell them how it's affected your life. Or you could just read how it has others. 3,000 people have already told their stories. Anyway, email Congress and share your stories at TaxCutsWork.com. That's all I ask you to do. TaxCutsWork.com. I return now to Gregg Jarrett, who has written this really. It's powerful. It's clear. I mean, this man makes this labyrinth clear, which is a great success on his part, and a great achievement. The book is titled The Russia Hoax, The Illicit Scheme to Clear Hillary Clinton and Frame Donald Trump. And you realize that both are critical. What she did, I mean, it is laid out with great clarity in the book, both on her emails, and Greg, tell me if that is correct, both in the emails and in the pay-to-play, that I don't know if in American history we had a level of corruption, and if I'm wrong, I don't want this to go further than my saying it right now, but I don't know if we have had a level of corruption to equal what she did and her husband did in selling America to the highest bidder, to the Clinton charities.
Well, I would agree with that, which is why I included it in the book, Chapter 4, Clinton, Greed, and Uranium One. The evidence to me, the reason I included it in the book was because there needed to be an explanation as to why Hillary Clinton used a private email server in the basement of her home for all of her business as Secretary of State. She rejected using the State Department's email system, which is completely secured and encrypted and protected. Now, why did she do that? I believe, and I argue in the book, that she did it to keep secret the fact that she put the equivalent of a for sale sign on the door of her office as Secretary of State. And I go through the enrichment of not just her foundation, more than $100 million from Russian sources at the time she's presiding over the approval of the sale of Uranium One to the Russians, giving 20% of our uranium assets to the Russians. But she is also enriching her husband, who's over there pocketing $500,000 for a quickie speech and meeting with Putin. And I think people who read that chapter will walk away and say, why wasn't she investigated? There was a sham investigation of her by the Department of Justice, but it went nowhere under Loretta Lynch, who is a longtime friend of Bill and Hillary Clinton. And I think people will be fairly outraged that no action was ever taken.
So let me. I didn't remember that. Am I correct in hearing you? Russians gave the Clinton Global Initiative $100 million?
Yeah, I think it comes to about 140. I forget the exact figure.
And wait, and so wait a minute. And there is an investigation of collusion between Trump and Russia?
That's right.
It's Orwellian. It's upside down.
Yeah, it is. It's Alice through the looking glass.
Yeah.
Everything's backwards and upside down.
Yeah.
No, it's one of those things that until you actually read about it, and I'm meticulous in my sourcing, there's 700 endnotes, footnotes to the book, so I source everything. And, the evidence is quite amazing.
I had a fantasy reading your book that John Brennan and you would have a public debate. Would you be willing to do that?
Well, I don't think anything that John Brennan says is credible.
That doesn't matter. I agree with you, but that's my point.
Well, but you can't have a debate with somebody who is not credible because they'll make stuff up.
Yeah, but you would show that he made it up. If there's anybody, look, I really believe that that you or someone like you, and there aren't many who know as much about this as you do. Maybe Andy McCarthy does, but he has not written it out the way you have. But I can't imagine anybody watching a debate between you and anybody on the left and not realizing, oh, my God, we have been fooled by the media. That's why I think it would be a public service if you would debate someone.
Well, I'll give that some thought. But as I write in the book, John Brennan, more than anybody else.
I know. That's why I mentioned his name, because you wrote that.
John, I know you did, and clearly you've read the book. I mean, this is a guy who was a longtime Clinton sycophant. He was a hyper-partisan, even though his position as CIA director is supposed to be nonpartisan. But he was out there pushing the phony dossier. He was pushing it to members of Congress. He was the instigator, I believe, of the FBI's investigation. And all you have to do is look at his incendiary tweets and most recent words about Donald Trump because he didn't like what Trump did at the news conference in Helsinki. He
treason.
accuses the president of being treasonous.
It's astonishing. I said to my audience earlier in the show, I can't think of any parallel again in modern American history of an ex-CIA director attacking a sitting president.
Well, and Brennan doesn't know the first thing about treason. First of all, it's a very specific law in American jurisprudence, both in the Constitution and statute. You have to be at war, either open or declared. We are not at war with Russia any more than we're at war with Canada or France. And so treason is inapplicable. Mr. Brennan might want to read the 1950 case of Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. They gave nuclear secrets to the Soviets, but were never charged with treason. They were convicted of espionage. And the reason is we weren't at war with the Soviets.
I hear you. That's a very powerful point. All right, folks, if you don't agree with him, I really want to hear you debate him. Gregg Jarrett's critically important book, The Russia Hoax, is up at DennisPrager.com. By the way, Prager, you will be hitting 1 billion views this year, and 65% of the viewers are under 35 years of age. So it's having an impact. All right, we are back here with Gregg Jarrett of Fox News, but most important, the reason I'm having him is because he's just authored this very, very important, unreadable, and easily understood, which means he worked hard. As an author, I can tell you I have a motto. I work hard so that the reader doesn't work hard. That's my motto when I write. And he has one. He has a motto like that as well. The Russia Hoax is what it is about. How do you feel about the latest information or disinformation, whichever, that Donald Trump Jr. had a meeting to get the information from the Russians with regard to Hillary Clinton, and that Donald Trump knew about it?
Well, the media hysteria over the Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer is a perfect example of a non-crime. It's not against the law to meet with a Russian. In fact, that's the title of one of my chapters. It's not a crime to talk to a Russian. Foreign nationals are permitted by law in America. To participate in political campaigns, they may volunteer their services as long as they're not paid or don't donate money. They can provide information. They can sit in on meetings. They can open their mouths. This is not considered to be a quote-unquote thing of value under American campaign laws. And if anybody has any doubts, just go to the Federal Campaign Election Act website, and it says so specifically. So when Nancy Pelosi stands in front of television cameras and says this is a clear violation of the campaign laws, she's wrong. She doesn't know what she's talking about. And others, a couple of Harvard and Yale graduates, Lawrence Tribe, the esteemed professor at Harvard, said, oh, it's treason. Nonsense. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
That's amazing. I didn't know he said that. All right, but I'm now talking in terms of if it happened, the issue is not legality, which I agree with you, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't lose big in the eyes of the country and that this confirms the quote-unquote collusion charge.
Yeah, well, I would argue that just as many Democrats have met with Russians as those individuals in the Trump campaign. I think there were a total of 22 contacts.
Right, but does it concern you? That's my bottom line. Politically, not legally, does it concern you because he denies knowing about the meeting, the president?
Yeah, no, it doesn't really. I mean, the people who will seize upon that as evidence of collusion are people who oppose Trump no matter what. And I think Republicans or independents who put it in the perspective of, wait a minute, it's perfectly acceptable, it's perfectly legal, what's the big deal? Especially if they read my book, which devotes many, many pages to this. I think these people will reinforce their opinion that Donald Trump did nothing wrong.
Which just brings me to a question that has been gnawing at me. What did the Democrats say about a hypothetical scenario? Let us say a foreign government. Let's say Luxembourg, okay? Completely depoliticize it. Luxembourg says to a Democrat, we have very, very important information about your Republican opponent. I don't even understand, why is that morally or in any other way or Americanly wrong to meet with them?
It's not. The Communist Party newspaper for the Russian Federation, Pravda, could print a story about Hillary Clinton and corruption, replete with evidence and documents, and it would be reckless if American candidates didn't expose that to the public.
All right, folks, the book, Gregg Jarrett's book, The Russia Hoax, it is up at DennisPrager.com. Gregg, thank you for writing it, and thank you for coming on.
And thank you for your kind words about it. Thank you for reading it, Dennis. Take care.
Take care. Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here. I have the famous... Some people are famous just for being famous. Some people have earned it. She's earned it. She's a best-selling author, a popular blogger, and teaches the latest Prager University video, A Nation of Immigrants. How appropriate, unfortunately, given what's come out about this poor girl, Molly Tibbetts, and her family. The poor family has 1 million views in 2 days. Michelle, hi. Welcome to the Dennis Prager Show.
Thank you, Dennis. It's a pleasure to talk with you again, and it was an honor to do the video for you.
Oh, that's a sweet thing for you to say. Well, we were honored that you did it. Listen, the obvious first question, and it's meant very seriously. Is there anything to be learned from the fact that it was an illegal immigrant who murdered Molly Tibbetts? Is it, and I mean it, this is a very fair, I mean it sincerely. I'm not looking for any given answer because there were two arguments. One is, this is what happens when you don't control your borders. Another is, come on, most murders, the vast majority of murders are not committed by illegal immigrants. Don't exaggerate the threat. Where are you on this issue?
Yeah, let me address both points. Of course, There are any number of murders that occur every day in America, and each one of them is tragic. The problem with murders that are committed by illegal aliens who either cross the border illegally, overstay their visas illegally, come here legally, and then violate the terms of their temporary visas. Even people who are here legally on green cards are subject to being returned if they violate either our laws or our principles and values. And that is our prerogative as a sovereign nation. The problem with illegal alien-related crime, of course, these are completely unnecessary. There's plenty enough of homegrown criminals that we have here without inviting all of the chaos and violence and anarchy that occurs when you don't control your borders. What is there to be learned from the Molly Tibbetts case? Well, I've been reporting on cases like this for more than 20 years now, and unlike a lot of the mainstream media, when they're forced to cover these cases and acknowledge the facts of these cases and how these criminals got here in the first place and how they were allowed to slip through the cracks, unlike a lot of the sort of Johnny-come-lately or short attention span media, each and every one of these cases that I have covered since I started my newspaper career in L.A. Affects me in almost a personal way. And that is because I myself am the product of legal immigration to this country. So having a system that is orderly and that adheres to the rule of law is important to me, because if we don't have that kind of control, there's no opportunity for families like mine. Because what happens is it provokes, I think, a rather rational response from most people who are upset by these criminal stories, Dennis, and that is they want to shut down the borders completely. And that has never been my position. I think that we need to have order. I think at this point, over the last 25 years that I've been covering these stories, what we need is to have a moratorium to examine every aspect of the immigration system to ensure that each and every part is working. And that doesn't mean that it's going to ever be foolproof. And we're hearing those kinds of criticisms now because the details that we're learning about the Tibbetts case and Christian Rivera, who is the suspected illegal alien from Mexico charged with her murder, is that he was working on a farm in Iowa, and the family that owns the farm, the Lang family, claims that Rivera actually passed through the E-Verify system. And I talk about that in the Prager University video because only 10% of employers are using E-Verify at this point. And one of the problems is that it's very subject to fraud because of phony documents. And I'm speculating at this point, but given my experience, I think that's probably what happened in this case.
I do believe that if all employers used E-Verify, that would be, if not as powerful a symbol as the wall, perhaps as powerful in terms of effect. So I want to understand. Yes. He was checked through E-Verify and passed? I didn't. Is that what you said?
Yes, and that is what the family is claiming. And so I would like to more know details about that. Chuck Grassley, of course, who is a senator from Iowa, has been a longtime watchdog on the bureaucratic aspects of immigration enforcement. He's asking for more details about this because obviously it is somebody from his home state. But systemically, I'm very curious. First of all, I don't know that those details have been verified yet, but that is what the family is claiming. And I agree with you. I think that if we had a fully functioning E-Verify system and that it was mandatory for all employers, it would have a huge deterrent effect. And it would also show that most employers in this country actually were not cheating the system, and particularly in agriculture. Remember, this is a dairy farming family that owned the farm that Christian Rivera worked for. In a lot of cases, unfortunately, there is a lot of looking the other way because so much of open borders is not just driven by the identity politics left, it is also driven by the big business right, and that is a point I've been making for 25 years.
Well, I have been echoing it in my way by telling my readers and my listeners much of my life that it's a sort of pincer The left, sociologically and morally and politically, and the big business on the so-called right. And so the rest of us, small businesses in particular, and just the rest of the population are caught in the middle. We don't have allies on the so-called business right.
That's exactly right. And a lot of people would be shocked to learn, for example, that over the last quarter century, at the federal level, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is essentially in a convenient alliance with the open borders identity politics right, which doesn't believe in defending the sovereignty of our country, the Constitution, the preamble which says that it is our prerogative to promote the common defense, provide for the general welfare,
yes, exactly.
the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity first. A lot of people on the left look at me and they see a child of immigrants.
Yes, hold on. I just got to tell everybody your video is up at the Prager U. Back in a moment. All right, everybody. Dennis Prager here. Let me just quickly say, Michelle, we're going to have to do a part 2. This is too important. I just wanted to get back to you to thank you for your video and all your work.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Dennis.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, it's a very important video. And this will be repeated in the, I think it's so important, I'm going to actually play this again in the third hour of the show. So if you're listening in the third hour and you heard it in the first hour, please understand what I did. It's a very important thing, and it's my way of reminding you. August, which is slowly coming to an end, or rapidly coming to an end, actually, is fundraising month for Prager University. Videos like these are very expensive to make, very expensive to market, and change minds. That's how we get so many views. That's the reason that they're trying to shut us down, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, Google. It's a problem because we're very effective, so we need your help. And I thank you for it, because we're fighting, and the people who help the fighters are just as valuable as the people who are fighting. There's a banner at DennisPrager.com. Of course, you can go to PragerU.com, or you could call 833-PRAGER-U. You're listening to The Dennis Prager Show.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio.
Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. These poetic lines, engraved on a bronze plaque beneath the Statue of Liberty, speak to who we are, a nation of immigrants. Until now. As Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer lamented, tears are running down the cheeks of the Statue of Liberty. We've turned our backs on those huddled masses, closed our borders, separated families, hardened our hearts. Or so you would think if you only read the headlines or watch TV news. Just one problem. It's not true. The United States still maintains the most generous immigration policies in the world. Generous to a fault, because the overwhelming numbers have stymied our ability to assimilate the huddled masses. 50 million residents of America are foreign-born. In fact, today the United States has more immigrants as a percentage of its total population than at any time since 1890. That's why, to give one illustration, 176 different languages are spoken among students in the New York City school system. How did we get here? For starters, America grants permanent residence to 1 million people every single year. And that's just the tip of the iceberg because of something you've probably heard referred to as chain migration. Chain migration allows immigrants to sponsor not only their immediate family, parents, spouses, and children under age 21, but much of their extended family once they gain citizenship, unmarried adult children and any children they might have, married adult children and their children, and brothers and sisters and their children. Princeton University researchers, using the most recently available data, found that immigrants sponsored an average of 3.45 additional relatives each. So the 1 million immigrants granted permanent residence each year potentially adds, over time, another 3.5 million. In addition, an estimated 100,000 refugees and asylum seekers, people who claim to be fleeing political or personal strife abroad, enter the country annually. From 2008 to 2017, the U.S. gave green cards to well over 1 million people for humanitarian reasons, allowing them to live and work here permanently. After 5 years, they can apply for full citizenship. We're not done yet. In that same time frame, nearly 500,000 more people came to America through the Diversity Visa Lottery, a program designed to admit more people from underrepresented countries into the U.S. Diversity visa applicants don't need a high school education, job skills, or pretty much anything. And thanks again to chain migration, spouses and unmarried children under 21 of visa lottery winners also get to come to America. This nonstop flow of new legal immigrants, based on family ties instead of skills, abilities, and allegiance to American values, has of course been supplemented by millions who enter the country illegally and stay illegally. Dominant media outlets use the euphemism undocumented, but the official U.S. government term, used in federal statutes, is illegal alien, an unlawful entrant who came without permission and stays in open defiance of our laws. The number of illegal aliens in the country is usually given as 11 million. But have you noticed that number never seems to change? Common sense suggests it's higher, much higher. And though illegal aliens themselves don't qualify for welfare, they receive free health care in our clinics and hospitals. And through their American-born children, they can expect to receive all manner of benefits, cash aid, food stamps, and housing vouchers. Their children are entitled to a free education in public schools. Building a high-tech border barrier would certainly help stem this flow. Ending chain migration is another obvious remedy. E-Verify, the national database that allows employers to check workers' immigration status, is also essential. So is a fully functioning entry-exit system to track visa overstayers. But all solutions will ultimately fail unless we get control of the numbers and enforce our laws consistently. It's Sovereignty 101. This is our home, and we have not only the right, but the responsibility to determine who comes in, how many come in, and what qualities and qualifications they bring. The truth is, we let in millions, and of course, millions more want to come. Who can blame them? But it's simply not possible or desirable to let in everyone. And it's not hateful to say so. It's not hateful to protect our borders. It's not hateful to protect our citizens. It's not hateful to protect our values. Lady Liberty may be shedding tears, not because we've stopped welcoming immigrants, but because our ill-conceived immigration policies are threatening the American dream. I'm Michelle Malkin, CRTV host and author of Invasion and Sold Out for Prager University. Thank you for watching this video. To help keep PragerU videos free, please consider making a tax-deductible donation.